Okay. And I do DC data community. I was on the board there. For people that don't know that, it's a pretty big kind of education focused data community in Washington, DC. Okay, so the context behind this, that's my research areas there, kind of data science and education generally, to be as broad as possible. The context behind this is, and for those that don't know, at UVA, and I know Claudia's here, I saw that, so she's heard much of this before, so she's part of the school, but one of the first schools, I think the first school of data science in the country. And as a result of that, the way that we went through kind of the process of building, at least kind of retrofitting to a certain extent, at least when it comes to the undergraduate specifically, before we started building the programs, we said to ourselves, because of the nature of which, the obligation that we felt as the first school of data science, is that we wanted to put more of a definition on what we meant by data science, that we wanted that to be represented in the nature of the school and the nature of the programs, and basically how we espouse to the larger society of academics and outward and industry professionals what we meant by data science, and that we were going to train our students inside that paradigm. So in going through this, a lot of these may look familiar. These are all kind of your traditional, pipelines is what they are for data science. And so what they are, to a certain extent, and there's more here, is that they're much more function than form, right? In terms of like academic depth, what we mean by the actual field of data science as compared to just the transactional elements associated with producing it. So we took a step back, much of this led by Rafael Alvarado and Don Brown, who are two professors in our school. And we're kind of working on getting this out into the world, but this is kind of our functional map in the way we think about kind of the theoretical foundations of the field of data science. And we are using this, at least I am, in terms of constructing the undergraduates and then our PhD programs as well, in terms of how we put courses together, how we set goals for what the outcomes of those courses would be, and we will try and balance these four elements. So I'll go into some detail about what these are, but given the pace with which we need to get through this, I'll probably use analogy. And so that's what I have here. So to a certain extent, this is what we think of. So I'll start up here at value. When we think about the value portion of data science, it's about business value. It's about this tension between the nature of open science and protected data. And then this larger kind of category of ethics. This is like the teacher and me coming out. I feel like I have to circle stuff. And then we have design. And so design is very much about kind of data designing products, human-centered design, but also can be associated with data creation and how you design databases, right? So database design could go there. So you think about this as like the creative elements or functional kind of elements associated with data. Analytics is the one that everybody knows pretty well, right? Optimization, prediction, machine learning. Systems can be defined as kind of anything that is related to the actual production of data science products. We think about this as coding, cloud computing, things like that, infrastructure, DevOps. And so some of this has seemed, kind of obvious, I think, in terms of those, especially people that are immersed into the field. But we didn't feel that there was like a really well-defined paradigm that kind of laid all this out in terms of just how the field should be shaped. And so we wanted to have that in place inside the school. So we had kind of a reference point before we went forward and started building programs. We could say, hey, we need to make sure to include all of these elements. So that's what we did. Here's just, again, some analogy here associated with these different components. We call it the 4+1 model and how we're thinking about data science. So maybe this helps kind of shape the landscape there a little bit more if needed. And then I have, and I'll send all these, these slides out, share them with the community here, but there is a bit more depth in each one of these categories. And we're working on kind of finalizing a series of papers actually that we'll put out that kind of define this in a more substantial way. And so I was planning on getting into each one of these, but kind of at a very high level, we can see here kind of design is about this human machine interaction. It's really focused on kind of the human element associated with data science and how that comes to fruition. The systems, that again is about kind of this infrastructure and architecture. Analytics is kind of the most commonly understood, statistical methods in machine learning, things like that. There's tensions here associated with those as there are with the other categories. And then the value one, like I said, is really centered on human value and kind of this disciplinary, the discipline of ethics and how that interfaces with the field of data science all along the data science lifecycle, by the way, in all sorts of different constructs. But this is kind of what that represents. So again, that was pretty quick, but that's kind of the nature of what we're thinking about in these 4 different areas. And then the practice is simply the combination of all those things. So putting those together and the balance of those. We're not suggesting that every one of those categories is equally represented for every project, but every category should be represented in every project and typically is. And sometimes the balances between those vary depending on what the nature of that particular project is. And so the practice here too has this kind of intrinsic element associated with domain knowledge and applying these things to real world problems. So we have, classes at the end that are associated with capstones or projects that fulfill kind of the requirement in this area. I did, the first slides, I dismissed the pipelines and then, here I'm bringing them back. So I created kind of this 4 phases of the data science lifecycle that uses the color coding associated with the different 4. And you can see how those kind of lay out. Again, it's not perfect. It's just a representation of the way that we think about it, I think generally. And I use this in my courses to just lay out the landscape of how each one of these elements can represent in a more tangible way in terms of just pipelines. You see here that the kind of the thing that maybe gets underestimated, but overestimated in this one, or overemphasized, I guess is a better way to say it, is the value portion of the pipeline in terms of just up here on the front end, and what we think is just actually creating a metric that can trace value and then tracing it once it's in deployment, and then using these value ideas throughout the data science pipeline to make sure that we're, kind of keeping an eye on the ball there. Again, I could go into lots of detail about this, but this is the idea, is to take it now, our intellectual process was to go from, kind of what is the field, how do we see it, what are these critical components, and then take that down to more of an applied way, which is what this is. So we put it into an actual pipeline, as compared to what seems to be kind of the shape of things now. They do in the opposite direction, say, hey, what do we need to do, and then go the other way. We wanted to kind of intellectually kind of define it largely and then go down to the more tangible practical things. And so we translated this into programs as well. So this is the minor in the undergraduate space here at UVA. We don't have a major yet, we're working on it, but we do have a minor, and it has these 5 components. If you can Google UVA data science minor, when you pull it up, actually each one of these categories is defined by the 4+1 model. So we have classes here, as you can see, in analytics, and then we have a systems course and a design or value, and then the last one is this domain course. And then, sorry, I don't know if the writing actually helps there. So here you can see it's kind of, we have a bit more, really kind of 2 classes in systems. So the way that we think about it is kind of these systems elements are more foundational. You have to learn how to program right at the beginning, but and then move more into kind of advanced topics relative to analytics. But it is just a minor, so it's a quick, it's a quick degree, just these 5 courses, and the idea is to give them kind of a cross section of the different flavors of the model to understand the field. So that's the idea. And then here I use these little color coded boxes to see what the balance is in terms of just the courses we're offering. So this is an example. We're extending this. We're planning to extend it to the major as well. So this is all, I need to put a big caveat in here. This is just an example. So we haven't decided any of this yet. But again, we're using this framework to make sure that we balance the different elements of data science as we see it. And so at the beginning here, what we see is kind of a fairly balanced approach with maybe a bit more kind of focus on some of the foundational mathematical elements, but each one of these domains is represented, and we want to make sure that that is consistent throughout the degree as students move up, and just don't bias ourselves kind of towards analytics or systems and forget these critical elements associated with value and design, which sometimes can be the case. And so I guess I just put that model everywhere. And then this is upper level electives concentrations. Again, just you can see here, we're kind of maintaining this balance, at least through this. And again, this is all theoretical. We have not decided any of this. maintaining this balance kind of at the top portion. And then there's a bit of a move towards analytics and systems to kind of foundationalize some of these topics that students to get more applied as they're kind of moving towards graduating. And then we finish with an immersion into, which is typical, I think, of these programs, of data science programs, to a more practical element where they do an applied project, whether that's a concentration in one of what we're calling kind of collaboratories, which is a relationship between the School of Data Science and another school on campus, on grounds, or kind of doing an applied project. So that's what that looks like. And then we also get, this is my course, so the goal is to get kind of granular in terms of just all the way down to the course level. So these are individual topics on a week-by-week basis. And because this course, again, is kind of outside of a more, kind of a scaffolded curriculum design, where we're kind of giving the students a cross-sectional look at the field, you can see that there's some blending here of topics with a good portion of actually, practicing, getting out there and getting used to using some of these things. In the future state, where we'll probably have courses that will be much more biased towards, in the individual topics, much more biased towards specific domain areas, where it'd be a value course would be, dominated by value-driven topics, communications, analytics. And so the idea is that you'll see less of this kind of homogeneous, or less of this mixed view, and much more of a kind of consensus into one of the domain areas. So we went from kind of this high level framework, and we put it into a pipeline, and we do it also for broad course design. And then we're also trying to just give it a snapshot, even down to the individual course level, in terms of the way things are being done. And there's so I don't have any slides after this one, but we're all kind of in the active process of building a school. And the idea, again, we're very committed to this framework. I think we're actually going to construct the school in large part around that framework, potentially having departments or people specialize in those areas. I feel like I'm up against time, so I'm going to stop.